morning. Welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Lorene Tanaka. We are here today with Tony Reynes, and Tony is a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Now, you were saying that you have about 12 years experience with the National Weather Service, and you've traveled everywhere.
Yeah, I've been around a while. I started my career in the San Juan office, that's in another tropical island, but on the other side of the world, that's in the island of Puerto Rico.
Okay.
So
and that's where you're from originally?
Yes.
Okay.
Then after that, I moved to Florida, then went through Texas. And I'm actually, this is my second time around in Hawaii because I'm a UH alumni. This is
You went to all the storm states?
Yes, yes.
Oh my goodness. Now, hurricane alerts. Let's talk about hurricane in our first half. Hurricane alerts are taken quite seriously here in Hawaii. Being armed with good information is key. Tell us, what lessons have we learned from Iselle and from Ana?
One of the most important lessons that we learned with these two events is that number one, Hawaii is not as protected as people think Hawaii is, specifically the smaller islands. So there is a misconception that the big island will always protect the state of Hawaii.
I hear that a lot.
Yes, and I think that specifically with Ana, we just saw that this is not true. The other thing is that a lot of people, when I talk to people on the street, the first thing that most people say is that hurricanes only happen in the island of Kauai.
Because it has. We've had the
right.
two big ones there.
And the reason is because of Eva and Iniki.
Right.
So I think that with Ana, we not only saw that the big island is not going to always protect the smaller islands, but that one of these hurricanes can actually take a track straight for either Maui or Oahu.
Because with Ana, isn't that, we kind of thought it was going to come straight in, right, along the side into Oahu?
Yes, there's a lot of factors at play that have a key role in terms of the final track of a hurricane. And with Ana, we were looking at several of these factors, and any small change in the overall scenario that we had could have made a huge impact in the end result of Ana.
Well, what we see as residents, and we're watching the TVs and all the reports, we see this cone that they call it. Tell us about this cone.
Well, the cone, a lot of people think that it represents the area that the strongest winds are going to cover. That's not the case. The cone, what it means is that at any point in the forecast, the center of the storm could be within that cone.
So it could go far to the left, far to the right?
Or far to the right. And as long as we have that cone close enough to any of the islands, we have to prepare for the worst.
Because once it goes far to any extreme, you still have the winds that are going to be blowing out from that center, right?
That's correct. And the other thing that a lot of people don't even think about is that you cannot apply your past experiences like directly into the event that you're experiencing, because each hurricane is unique. It depends on the size, it depends on the angle of approach of the storm, and more importantly, it depends on how the storm can interact with the land.
That's interesting to say that you can't apply your past habits, because so many people in Hawaii, you hear talk on the streets and they're like, oh, we'll be okay, we didn't do, the last one never hit us, we'll be fine, this one's not going to hit us. But you say, no.
Correct.
That is dangerous to think that way.
Correct, specifically because of the two cases we talked before, like Iniki and Eva. There's a lot of people that think that it's always going to be that way. Hopefully this year, 2014, was a big lesson learned, because we saw not only with Ana, but also with Iselle, that these storms have more than one way to bring hazardous weather to Hawaii.
Do they always come from the south? Hurricanes?
That's a very good question. They normally don't have to come from the south, but I would say that the southern track is probably the most dangerous for Oahu.
Does it change whether it's an El Nino year or an El Nina year? Does it change? What is the difference?
Very good question. Well, the El Nino or La Nina, they have a big impact on the hurricane season, because one of the main ingredients hurricanes love is some warm temperatures in the surface of the ocean. They like the warm waters. And the El Nino or La Nina, it has a big impact on that sense. So normally when we have a year with an El Nino or a strong El Nino, those are the years that we have a higher chance of experiencing a big hurricane in the Central Pacific. Not necessarily that it's going to hit Hawaii, but the conditions for big hurricanes to form and maintain themselves are much better in an El Nino year because the surface, the waters at the surface of the ocean, they're normally warmer in an El Nino
So
year.
2014 was El Nino.
It was what we call a transition year.
Oh.
The El Nino really never really kicked on. There's still a chance, we still have a chance, but we certainly were experiencing warmer than normal temperatures in the surface of the ocean. However, there was one year that we experienced a very strong El Nino, not only the Pacific, but the impacts were felt basically worldwide. That was 1992, which happens to be the year of Iniki.
Oh, so we hear people constantly saying the hurricane season goes from June to November 1st. Should we be letting our guards down at November 1st and say, okay, we're out of hurricane season, we're good?
Well, actually, their season runs through November 30.
Okay.
So we still have technically one more month to go.
But that's not to say that a hurricane could not still occur in December.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
It could happen. It could happen. It's just that the conditions are not just as favorable to have a hurricane forming in
The
December.
warm waters.
But it's not impossible.
Okay, okay. So what would you say to residents out there? Is just to always be prepared?
Yes, we always have to be prepared. And it's like we say, you always hope for the best, but you have to prepare for the worst. And one of the things we have to keep in mind here in the Hawaiian Islands is the type of construction that we use, especially for our homes. So there's a lot of wood structures, and there's a lot of single home family, single family homes that don't have a concrete roof. It's mostly wood or materials that are.
Or you have the single wall construction
single wall
too.
construction.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we can do to make sure that we are prepared for a hurricane here in Hawaii is to make sure that you have what we call the hurricane straps, the reinforcements for your roof. Because most of the time we don't even think about the reality of the impact of a hurricane on a home. And historically, the weakest link in your house, it's not the windows or the doors, it's actually your roof.
Oh, see, we think of the windows and taping up the windows or doing.
Correct, correct.
Okay. So how are hurricane straps attached to the corners of the roofs and then anchored down?
Yeah, there are several points, and actually a structural engineer will know exactly what to do with your home.
Okay, so hurricane straps. Do it now.
Yes.
Don't wait until you have an alert.
Correct. That's the first thing you have to do in terms of assessing the potential for your home to be your the place where you're going to look for refuge.
Right.
And then the other thing is that you have to make sure you have what we call a ready kit. Be sure that you have everything you need in terms of basic necessities for each member of your family. And you should always do this before the hurricane season starts.
The easiest would be like a backpack or something that can be carried easier, right?
Right, correct. But there are other items that you have to store in your home. Like, for example, you need to know if you have enough water for each member of your family. We're talking about maybe 5 to 10 gallons per person. And make sure that you have enough supplies, like dry goods and canned food.
Medications.
For at least 5 to 7 days, and medications is very important. Because something we haven't experienced here specifically in Oahu in a very long time is an extended period of power outages. So we normally have the typical thunderstorms or the flooding events that can knock down the power for one day.
Right.
But when you have the impact of a hurricane, and trust me, I'm talking as personal experience, you can have a very extended period of time without power, and in the worst case scenario, without power and running water.
Now you say personal experience because you lived through Hurricane Hugo.
Correct.
What was that like for you?
Hugo was such a life-changing experience that it actually moved me to become a meteorologist. So it had a long-lasting impact.
What did you go through? You went through no electricity, no water. For how long?
After the hurricane hit my hometown, and we came out and we saw the level of destruction, reality really was setting in.
Just
at that
hits you,
point.
right?
It hits you real hard.
Wow.
And we were not prepared for the extended period of time that we were going to experience without not only electricity, but without running water. And it was about 2.5 months later that we got the power back and the running water back. So we spent all that time just, you know, surviving, just going through different neighbor towns looking for water almost every day. It was pretty tough times.
Wow. What are some, people have different statements that they make, different myths and things. Like you said, hurricanes only hit Kauai.
Yes.
We'll be safe because the Big Island will protect us.
Correct.
Are there other myths that are out there that we seem to rest on?
Yeah, I think the biggest myth is that hurricanes are not as bad as people always say they can be. And the main reason for that is because if you look at the history of tropical cyclones here in the Central Pacific, other than Iniki and maybe Eva, normally what we have is just tropical storms.
Which is what Ana turned out to be, more of a tropical storm.
Yes, but Isel was a pretty powerful hurricane some 24 to 48 hours before it reached the Big Island. And that's because there are some atmospheric factors here in the area of Hawaii that helps us in terms of keeping storms weaker than, for example, their counterparts in the Atlantic. The thing is that that's not going to be the case all the time.
All the time.
All the time. And I think Iniki broke that rule. Especially if we have an El Nino year, then all those atmospheric factors become much more favorable.
And a lot of people, though, they think, oh, we're fine if it's La Nina, then we're fine.
Right.
But it's when they announce El Nino, we have to be careful now. But
Correct.
you're saying anything could happen at any time, just be prepared.
Yes, we have to be prepared, especially because based on the experience that I had coming from another tropical island with a lot of hurricanes, especially structures that are not made out of concrete, on a big hurricane, the damage could be extreme and substantial.